Hi, I'm Codie Sanchez. Welcome back to the Big Deal podcast. When I first started out in finance, I was like maybe a lot of you guys. I was working nonstop. I kind of made some pretty good money, but I was spending too much of it. It's really expensive just to live once you get out of college. You're like, wait a second, I'm making all this money, but then I've got rent, then I've got a car, then I've got to eat. What I realized is that most people make really big mistakes early on in their career. And I did that too. So I thought I'd tell you what they were and how I would change them now. If I was going to make myself rich, have a ton of fun, and make myself really set up for my 30s, my first rule would be move fast, but take more detours. So my senior year of college, I took the second half of the year, and I spent most of it down in Mexico. I was a human trafficking journalist along the US-Mexico border, and I would cover something called Las Desaparecidas, the disappeared women in Juarez, which is right across the border from El Paso. And I saw things that I'll never be able to unsee. I saw bodies swinging from overpasses because at that time it was the Sinaloan and the Sonoran cartel, and they were going at each other. One of the biggest prison breaks that ever happened in northern Mexico was there when I was there. I would go to the morgue to check how many people were women. It was mostly women who were murdered, and I would try to figure out who they were and write stories about them. Maybe the part that I've never told is like, I had adventures. You know, I remember we were covering one of the cartels, and we went to this club in Juarez, which was kind of dangerous, which is like half the fun of being young is doing stupid, young, dangerous things. And I remember being in the club, and you knew which cartels were in there by some of the things that they wore, the colors that they wore, and the outfits. But I remember like having a little love story with a guy who was trying to get out of a cartel while he was there, and like dancing to this music, it's called banda, and having this, you know, this moment where I like find out that one of the cartels is going to have like a big violent event. And so we were journalists, so we went and covered it. Why do you want this? Because I eventually got into finance, and I became obsessed with one guy whose name was Jim Rogers. He was the former partner to George Soros. I know not everybody loves him, but he was super, super rich. And at the time that he was with George, they had the top performing hedge fund of all time. But I remember when I was going on my adventures, I read about his. And what was fascinating is one of the reasons that he's as big as he is today and as successful is he stopped working with George Soros, he gave it all up, and he moved to travel around the world. But I remember reading his stories, and he was saying, I didn't have to be that much smarter than anybody else. I didn't have to work that much harder than anybody else because I was doing things that nobody else could think of that led to money. His adventures are actually one of the main reasons why he became so successful. He learned how to see opportunity in emerging markets and think like, oh, if I invest, if I bring US dollars to this location, my dollar goes 2 to 3x farther. And so if I buy a house or I buy properties or I buy investments, I'm immediately in the money on them, basically. And so he would do this all over the world. And I think today, like half the problem with being young is we have these soulless, terrible jobs where we don't do anything interesting. And then people say it'll be fine. You'll eventually be able to afford a house and have a life you want and it'll be okay. But we sit on TikTok and Instagram all day because it's so much better than the life that we live because we no longer do adventures. We just sit in a fucking corporate cubicle all day under fluorescent lights. And I don't think you need to do that. My first job after being a journalist and covering those war atrocities in Juarez, after that, I went to a company to work in investments. And I kind of hated it. I made a ton of money. So, you know, first multiple 6 figures, then I made, you know, 7 figures. And I was like pretty miserable still, which sounds like a world-class problem, like first-class problem, but that was the truth. And then I realized that I wanted to go back to adventuring. And so I decided that I wanted to build up a business in Latin America. And so I kind of spoke okay Spanish. I got with this company called First Trust, and they didn't have a Latin American business division. And I was like, listen, I do finance stuff in the US. You don't have anybody doing finance stuff in Latin America. What if we pair the two? Let me go and build this business for you. Like, pay me the same amount that you're paying me to do America things, and I'll go do Latin America things. And I built a business that was $1 billion in assets under management. There was this one moment where I sat in the office in Santiago, Chile. It was one of my biggest investors there. My Spanish, again, okay, not great, but we bonded because guess what was behind him? he also had a copy of Jim's book. That was George Soros's partner. His name is Jim Rogers. The reason that this guy ended up giving me my first tens of millions of dollars in investment was because he had been inspired by the same book. And this one man led to a meeting where just about everybody I needed to know in Santiago, Chile, and build my almost $1 billion in assets under management business, I was connected to through him. Santiago, Chile is actually like all the wealth is super concentrated. So one man, a mutual love of adventure, something a little interesting, led to a giant business. Those people today who tell you that you can't have fun and you can't adventure while you're working are totally fucking full of it. You know, I hiked the mountains of Patagonia by myself, one called Torres del Paine. It's beautiful. And I remember at that time I was like kind of going through heartbreak. I don't know if that ever has happened to you guys, but you know, my heart was broken. I was having a really hard time. So I went on a solo trip down to the edge of the world. And I'm by myself. It's one of the last days of the season before it gets really, really cold there. And I'm in this converted hotel that looks like an apocalyptic bunker. It was so cool. There happen to be flamingos, which is amazing in Patagonia. They have these flamingos that, you know, fly over these like glacial lakes. It's almost eerie. It feels like another world. And so I go on this hike by myself. Everybody else is couples, and I'm like sitting by myself in the evening. We're getting ready to go hike the main mountain, Torre del Paine. And we're hiking and I'm, you know, thinking about things. And I have this moment where I'm really in my head and I think everything is about me. And as we're crossing a bridge, I put my hand on one side of the bridge and the bridge breaks. This is a true story. And I'm carrying a backpack because we're hiking and I got a bunch of shit in it and food and water and whatever. And I've got my hiking poles and I fall off of the side of the bridge. And the bridge has like, you know how bridges have like the pole that holds the handle? Well, thankfully that pole hadn't broken, just the handle had. So I wrap my leg, my knee basically catches on the side of the pole and I'm hanging off the side of the bridge that's like shaking. And, you know, and I remember thinking in that very moment, like, what if this was the end? Like, what if everything ended at that moment? And in that moment, I had the weirdest thought, which is, I've lived a pretty fucking cool life. So even if I fall off into this glacial lake all the way down there and I crash on those rocks and it's a total disaster, that's pretty cool. I built a $1 billion business in Latin America. You know, I'd loved somebody, I'd lost somebody, I'd had adventures around the world. Like, cool. I don't want to die, that sounds awful, but if I have to, cool. And so I wish somebody else would have told me when I was younger, it is okay to go do wild and crazy fucking things and you do not have to spend your entire life working. In fact, you can intertwine the two. The second lesson I have is I do not want you to stop and ask yourself, is this all that life is? And I'm rather obsessed with this other guy by the name of Jim Simons. Apparently I got a thing for Jims. So Jim is the founder of Renaissance Technologies, like arguably one of the best investors in the world. His flagship fund, it's called Medallion. They basically built these algorithms that made 66% average annual returns every single year, making it like one of the world's most profitable funds ever. What's fascinating about him, though, is before he became a multi-billionaire, he took many detours beforehand. And he talks about how he survived a mudslide going through Latin America, how at one point he was surrounded by a group of teenagers and an angry mob that wanted to kill them. I think the thing that people don't tell you today is, I wonder how many builders are adrenaline junkie seeking adventurers. I don't think you want your life to be planned out and easy. You want excitement and surprise and problems big enough to be worthy of conquering them. And Jim Simon keeps asking himself this question all the time, which is this it? Is this how the rest of my life will be? And he had it all. Like when he decided that he was going to go create his own business. He was at MIT, the university. He had tenure, so super hard to fire, make a lot of money, really hard to get. He had a Harvard University degree. He had mathematical, academic respect, but his life seemed to be too much planned. And so he went on a new adventure. And, you know, I basically made millions off of the fact that I wanted to do adventure and business. So that's what you maybe could consider doing too. The third lesson is called Find the Unripe Bananas. I'll tell you a couple different stories, but the main idea is this. Where is their money hidden in plain sight? So there was a business owner who created a banana empire by buying overly ripe bananas they were all going to throw out. His name was Sam Zamuri, famously known as Sam the Banana Man. Sam basically noticed that big fruit companies were discarding ripe bananas that were too mature to ship across long distances before spoiling. They would just throw them away. So he bought these ripe bananas at a discount, and then he said, what if we were just faster? Like, how could we get them as fast as possible to only the closest cities, like New Orleans, for instance? And then he sold them right before they spoiled for way less and turning a solid profit. So by the time he was 21, he had made over $100,000, which is worth, like, today, that would be millions and millions of dollars, and founded his own company, basically. And he later took over United Fruit Company, which was one of the most powerful corporations of its time. So he started with a few ripe bananas, then he built his own company, then he takes over one of the biggest companies in the space, and then he buys more of the other companies in his space. He was big on mergers and acquisitions. And I like this finding the unripe bananas idea, because it's the same with another company called Misfit Foods, where the founder basically went to an apple orchard, saw them like having bruised apples or apples that fell on the ground that still looked totally fine, and said, like, why are you throwing those away? What if instead I bought all of the beaten up, like, weird looking fruit that was still good, and I sold it at a discount in like surprise boxes. And he turned that into a business well worth over 9 figures. I think this idea of adventure leads to opportunity is the underlying of all of this. Would you have found the apples, the bananas, the opportunity if you were behind a seat? No. And so my last lesson for you is, like, do not ever let anyone tell you what you're capable of, or that you have to do it their path. Choose your own. When I left Goldman Sachs, my own family said replacing Goldman Sachs, so GS, with CS, Codie Sanchez, was a huge mistake. When I started a division in Latin America, colleagues said, you must be a secretary. You're too young to head the region. Another one asked me who I had sex with in order to get the job that I had at that time. And the answer was none of those motherfuckers, that's for sure. Anyway, when I got on social media, one of my partners said, literally, I saved this text, you guys, I can prove it to you. You're dumbing down the firm. I hope you got more likes today. Joke's on you, Dan, because now it's bigger than yours. No, just kidding, but my bank account is bigger than his. And then when I left to start my own media company, a colleague at the company at that time said, well, don't lose my number for when that cute little blog fails, And like, I think he kind of meant well, but I torched that number immediately just on principle alone. When I started a venture capital fund, they said, you're not in Silicon Valley, that'll never work. They said, Austin, Texas, that's not where the deals are. And now we have like one of the top performing venture capital funds in all of the 2022 vintage, which means for that year. It's called Contrarian Thinking Capital if you guys want to see it. And then when I started buying businesses, the internet trolls said, they're going to make no money. You probably don't even own them. I bet you've never even been in a laundromat. Like, you can't win with these people. When I started our academy to teach people how to sell, buy, and grow businesses, a bunch of ex-Wall Streeters that I used to work with said, this will never work. Normal people can't buy businesses. When I launched my book, if you guys have seen Main Street Millionaire, they said, just another internet guru, I bet it sucks, and it won't sell any copies. And then it became a New York Times bestseller. When I launched BizScout, which is our business and buying and selling marketplace, they said, it's just a knockoff of some of the others. It'll never get big. So the moral of the story is not that I've done all of these cool things, it's that every single thing I've ever done and every single thing you ever do, people will tell you why you can't do it. And why will they do that? Because, like, if you achieve that, then what's their excuse? Because if you do a big thing, then how come they failed? Because you become a mirror to a person they don't really like, which is themselves. I've never had somebody who was doing more than me, who is more successful than I am, shit on me on the internet, ever. And you won't either. So ignore the haters, because the truth is, you have to trust you, not any other who. Your biggest mistakes will not be a how or a what, but a who. If I could go back and do anything differently, it would be, 1, I got married too young and with reservations. I wouldn't do that again. And 2, I felt like that was the path I had to follow because everybody else did. And so more than anything else, I think what you should probably try to go do is get into some more fucking trouble. The other day, somebody asked me what they should do to create content like I do and how to go viral on the internet. And I thought about it for a second. And I was like, my first viral piece of content, you guys, was about a laundromat I bought that was kind of like a piece of shit, but how I made money on it anyways. And the reason that went viral is I was doing it. I wasn't like, let me sit and think about 10 things young people should do today in order to become successful, as said by me, not a successful person. It wasn't any of that. It was literally, I'm doing this thing, I don't know, I think it's cool, it's hard to hide obsession. And so my response to this person was, if you want to be cool, you got to do cool shit. So like when you go do cool shit, your life is the content. You don't have to come up with ideas. You live it every single day. So like, do you really need to go watch another get ready with me video from somebody? Do we really need to talk to somebody else on the internet who hasn't done a thing that they said they're going to do, they said they did? Go get some experience, get some scars and scabs, bring back some stories. And then the content writes itself. You can talk about war because I was in a cartel war as a journalist. You can talk about going to Mexico and building a business there. And I remember walking in the presidential palace and trying to figure out how to sell them investments. Fun side story there that was hysterical. At the time, I was like down a walkway. This is in Mexico City, and if you've ever been to the presidential palace there, it's just stunning. It's in the middle of, it's called the Zocalo. And I'm walking down the thing. I think I'm going to meet with one of the heads of the Treasury Department there, and trying to get them to let us invest some of their money. And I'm bringing one of my super Midwestern principals of the company. So he's the one that invests the money. I was the one building out the business and selling the investments. And if you look on the wall, as we're walking past, there's all these photos of former Mexican presidents. And this poor guy, when I was like, oh my gosh, he's like, man, they don't really look like Mexicans, do they? And I was like, Jesus, because they're very Spanish looking as opposed to indígena, which is another way to say like more indigenous looking. And I remember in that moment thinking, this guy who was like, I don't know, he must have been 65 years old. He has traveled so lightly upon the world. He has not had adventures. He doesn't know what it's like really on the ground in some place like Mexico. And so he makes a silly comment because he had never really seen, even though he had all the money in the world, he had probably locked himself up in fancy resorts in Cabo and all-inclusives and never really seen anything. And those little stories, like the time that I almost got kicked out of the Mexican stock exchange, and I had an entire business there that was reliant on me being able to have my investments on the Mexican stock exchange. If they would have kicked us out, I would have been out of a job and out of money. And so I remember it happened because BlackRock, they bought my biggest client, one of the Afores. Those are one of the pensions down there. And so BlackRock bought my biggest client, who is called Banamex. I have this amazing friend of mine, Rodrigo, down there. We did a bunch of business together, and I lost a $100 million client because they literally bought that entire business and then replaced my First Trust investments with their iShares BlackRock investments and got rid of my entire business overnight. And so these adventures led to a place where today, when something goes wrong in business, when something doesn't work out, when we've got a new opportunity, I can go, that's cool. Because you know what the thing is about problems? When you find problems, that's where all the profit is. And so young people today, if you're listening, and if young Cody was listening, I would say, go and adventure some more. Make some big, huge mistakes. Trust you instead of another who. Never settle for a life where you get to say, is this it? And don't believe that you have to do some traditional career path in order to make a ton of money. If I'm nothing else, I could be an example for you of why that is not necessary. All right, guys, if you liked this episode, let me know. It's kind of just me talking to you more from the heart. Like I wish somebody had talked to me when I was young and trying to figure things out. Or even if I was older and before I figured it out. If you liked this episode, you might want to go back to another one I did called Why Top 1% of Earners Don't Stay in Their Hometowns. And the reason why is because it might push you to go shake up life a little bit, and then you can grab it. If you aren't subscribed right now, what are we doing? I thought we were buddies. Hit that subscribe button. I want to see you next week. Every single time you subscribe, it means we get to get better guests for you. It means we get to talk about the subjects that you care about. Put down in the comments what you want me to cover next. I read every single one of them because this is the Big Deal podcast and you are a big deal to me. Hey guys, if you've ever thought about buying a business, we've built what I think is the best acquisitions and business buying community and education curriculum in the world. If you've ever thought about wanting to buy or own a business, or if you want to add more businesses to the mix, it's called the Contrarian Community. And what this is the goal is we give you the 3 things that the best business buyers use: your own advisory team, your own investment committee,
and a deal team. We get together each week to review deals live and beat up all the deals that you're currently looking at while you simultaneously learn the best way possible, which is called modeling, by seeing other people put together deals. This is how private equity buys businesses. This is how investment teams work. And we're stealing the methods from Wall Street and giving them to you. If this is interesting to you, go to click the link and you can actually talk to my team direct about if this is a fit or not. We can help guide you. The link is in the show description. By the way, if you're building a business right now and you're stuck or you want to break out to the next level, maybe you're not where you want to be today. Believe me, I've been there many, many times. I want you to know I got you. We help thousands of business owners a year figure out how to scale to the next level. One of my favorite mentors said, every level you have, there's just a higher level and a higher devil. And so if you've been in business for a while and you're doing 6, 7, or 8 figures, there's probably one thing standing in the way of your next level. That's why we host growth and scale workshops 4 times a year throughout the year in Austin, in Miami, in San Diego, and you may be a fit to come to one of them. If it sounds interesting to you to get help on how to scale your business to the next level, you can reach out to my team at the link in the show notes. We believe in you builders, but we also believe that it's a lonely road and you can't do it by yourself.
Whenever the government says, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, they're typically not. And I am talking about red, white, blue, purple, whatever the color they show up as. The only good government is a one that is at a distance, allowing you to be able to continue to do the things you need to do on a daily basis, as opposed to mandating you do one thing or another. Quick FYI, before we get too much into it, we've got just a few months before my first ever book is out in the world. If you want to pre-order it for yourself or anyone you love, you can do that in the link in the show notes, or you can search it online. It's called Main Street Millionaire. You'll love it. I think it'll make you a lot of money, and I hope you guys pre-order it. Hello, and welcome back to all those who put in the work. I'm Codie Sanchez, and this is the Big Deal podcast. Okay, this segment's a little bit different and interesting, I hope, for you guys. We're going to call this one something along the lines of current events. If you want to tell us what you think we should name this podcast, drop it in the links. Come up with a catchy name for us. We've got our interview podcasts, we've got our Moneymaker podcast series, and now we got this one where we talk to you about what's happening in the world. Let me preface it with this. I think we have to obsess a little bit for just a small amount of time on what's happening with the government right now around us. Let me tell you why. I used to run a business in Latin America at a company called First Trust. We grew it to over $1 billion in assets under management. We were one of the fastest growing international businesses in Latin America. And before I left that company to go start my own, I watched what happens when we let the government get in the way of business. In fact, when I was in Latin America running our business was the same time a new president came on board in a country called Argentina, and that president's name was Cristina Fernandez. Cristina Fernandez came into an Argentina that was just starting to write its way out of formerly socialist policies. And Cristina Fernandez came in, and over the span of 3 to 6 months, she nationalized just about every business. She kicked people out of the country like me, who had financial companies where we were helping people who knew that the Argentinian dollar there at the time was really volatile. So even now, if you go to Argentina, you don't go to a bank to exchange your currency, you go to the black market because you get a much better rate, and oftentimes they run out of dollars in the banks in Argentina. And that is because they've had really poor management by the government. So my business was all around Latin America. And in the span of the night, Cristina Fernandez made my business illegal, which was just allowing them to invest in international exchange-traded funds, mutual funds, things we think of as normal, because she wanted to keep all the money in Argentina. She wanted to lock down all of production, and she wanted to own everything. And because of that, the economy cratered overnight. And some of my friends who own businesses there had them taken away. And we had a mass exodus from Argentina, and the country has never really recovered. And I watched that. And so now when people say, Codie, stay in your lane, don't talk about the government, I don't talk about Republicans or Democrats. I think they're largely the same in many ways. I talk about the fact that we have to protect our own freedoms, and that I will do everything I humanly can to fight for each one of you to be your own sovereign and to be in charge, and to have no big brother or big government tell you what you can and can't do. You don't need it. I think that you are more competent than most people who wear a little flag lapel on their pin and try to tell you that they're here to protect you. And so today I thought we got to look at something that's a little crazy, which is what's happening with government spending. And I want to break that down, but I wanted to tell you why. Because if we let the government become what Argentina became, which is somewhere where they nationalize the economy because the government doesn't know how to build, government only knows how to protect and how to spend. They are not innovators. You guys are. And I don't want us to become a poor replica of a country that has more wealth and beauty you can imagine. Argentina's gorgeous, but sadly people in power who don't believe in the individuals. They believe in the collective. And so let's talk about what the hell's going on in the world today. We're going to do this pretty quickly. We're going to break it down and we're going to come up with some ideas for what to do next. Okay, first, as of July 26, 2024, the US federal debt has skyrocketed to $35 trillion. Almost equal to the size of the economy. Not fun. Listen, the thing is, this is not actually new news, as the U.S. has been running a deficit for a very long time, since 2001, meaning we've been spending more than we earn and borrowing to fill that gap. Things got even worse after March 2020. You guys all remember this, COVID, when central bankers started partying like they just closed an IPO and had bottle service at Tao in New York. You just picture little central bankers shaking their champagne bottles. So why should we care about this? Well, economic ruin does not sound fun. And not to be dramatic, but this debt could lead to a budget crisis, higher interest rates, and economic instability. And so I think we got to really understand it. Because more than that, long term, it could hurt America's standing in the world, which candidly we can't afford right now. I thought I'd do an episode really clearly breaking down what is going on, why it matters, in a way that won't put you to sleep, but will make you sound smarter than either your neocon perma-war uncle at the family gathering or your kind of commie money is a human right cousin who's never had a real job. Cool? Okay, we're going to break it all down. And we're going to read up on what some of the brightest minds in business have to say about this. So let's steal their homework and get into it. But first, don't be greedy. Share the pod with the needy. I repost all of you who tag me in your Instagram stories sharing the pod. So make my day and your bud's bank account swell and share this episode. We see a ton of people downplaying our economic situation, and it makes me nervous. Some of the smartest minds in business are starting to sound the alarm. The contrarian view here is that we should actually be listening to these warnings. You see, our economic challenges, it doesn't mean that we're about blind optimism or doom and gloom. It's about facing hard truths, considering unconventional solutions, and being prepared. All right, so Elon Musk has been sounding the alarm about our financial situation. I know some people don't like him and think he's mean or think he's not great, and that could all be true, but he's definitely smart. And anytime somebody has a bank account bigger than I do and has built something bigger than I have, I like to at least listen to part of it. And I want to break down and see where I disagree or where I agree. But with a guy like this, it's worth seeing what his brain is thinking. So he said things like, the dollar will be worth nothing if the US doesn't do something about its national debt, like this tweet right here. And he's basically talking about the fact that this tweet talks about interest payments on US national debt will shatter 1.1 trillion this year, eating 76% of all income taxes collected. And I think whether you like the guy or not, he's pretty much a legend. And so let's quantify him before I use a few more takes from him and a few more of his research. So think about this for a second. I think that Elon Musk might be one of the best CEOs of our generation. And then you might go, oh, Cody, you're just a fangirl. You're an Elon stooge. Okay, let's qualify this in a few different ways. Do you run a business that is harder than rocket ships in space? No, you probably don't. No, I fucking don't either. Okay, well, he does that business. And not only does he do that business, get this stat, 60% of all satellites in Earth's orbit are now from Starlink. 60%. Look at this image, which basically shows of the 10,036 satellites in the Earth's orbit, Starlink has 6,800 of them. How about from this perspective? The US will launch like 159 rockets this year. SpaceX has already launched 84. Last year, he launched 96. Okay, so he's pretty good at space, one of the hardest games out there. And oh, by the way, if you fuck up, you die. That's pretty serious. But it's not even talking about what he's done in media, electric cars, batteries and open sourcing that technology. If you think about it, a friend of mine, Balaji, has a great tweet where he talks about how hardware is one of the most difficult tech or businesses that you could run. And then you add the fact that he's going electric, space, reusable rockets, and managing 3 multi-billion-dollar companies simultaneously. I think his pain tolerance must be unrivaled. And on top of that, anyone who thinks he's bad for the economy is either lying or so dumb as to be irrelevant. I think we should pray that our best and brightest, like him, continue to exist and that our government is 1/10 as efficient using our tax dollars as he is using his shareholders' dollars. And in fact, I think if you're wondering if you should date a woman and take her home to your mom, or if you should date a guy and take him home to your dad, you should ask them what they think of Elon Musk. I think it is a great litmus test of intelligence to ask somebody, do you think that Elon Musk is better for society or worse for society? If they say worse for society, cut and fucking run. And so, before we get into more, I just wanted you to know what the man's accomplished, because I think it's really easy to look at Twitter and say his memes are dumb and I don't like that he did this or that. But we've got to go one step deeper than this. So when I was looking at more data from a couple people that I respect highly, from Elon Musk, from Balaji, from another one of my good friends, Brian Westbury, who's an economist, I pulled together a bunch of information on the debt crisis overall in the US. And what I thought was fascinating is we've been running a deficit for years, obviously. And at which point, most people on the internet will go something along the lines of, this doesn't matter, we can keep printing capital, we're the tallest of all the midgets, which is a way of saying that, we're the best economy in the world still, even if all the economies aren't that great, at least we're better than theirs. But there's a couple things that are different than at any time. One is, look at rising interest costs. I mean, the government is spending more and more just to pay interest on the debt. This is becoming one of the largest expenses in the federal budget, which you can see right here looking at this slide. And then look at social programs at risk, like Social Security, Medicare. They could run out of money in the next decade, leaving millions of Americans without critical support. I think if you also want to have a litmus test of an intelligent person, the next question should be, can we continue to have social programs structured the way that we do? Or should they be need-based? Because at some point we won't be able to have an input like this for one generation to the next. In fact, Scott Galloway has an incredible TED Talk basically talking about how these programs are stealing from the youth to give to the next generation. And I think that is actually true. I think if you are a mom, a dad, a grandma, a grandpa, and you look at this data and you don't think that you are stealing from the youth to pay for your generation, you're not looking at the math very clearly. Now, the problem is that the government can't seem to do anything about this. Lawmakers don't want to fix it. It's very unpopular. But why? Because voters are not young people. Voters are middle-aged to older. And so it's human nature. We vote in our self-interest, and those who are older are going to continue to vote these programs on. And, I think there's a really interesting post out there by Balaji. He basically talks about the true state of the financial situation in the US and talks a lot about debt, borrowing, and the value of the dollar. What's interesting, I'm going to break down 3 of these graphs. So the first one, we basically see how when the government puts a program in place, they rarely pull it back. This is important to know. It happened during TARP, that's the Asset Relief Program, which happened in 2008, post-financial crisis. It happened on 9/11 with rolling out widespread ability to keep us safe, but also learn a lot about its citizenry. Never pulled that back as well. So in 2003, the Fed issued more emergency loans than during the 2008 financial crisis. Think about that for a second. If you look at this graph, you can see it's like, 5x more emergency loans in 2023 than 2008. If you guys weren't around in the workplace in 2008, it was bad. I was actually at Goldman in 2009, 2010, which was the worst part of the crisis. 2008 is when it started. You saw the first trickle from Lehman Brothers, and like a game of dominoes, you basically saw one bank fall after bank fall after bank fall. And in 2009 and 2010 is when Goldman really got it. And we had to go in front of the Senate and give a bunch of commentary about what had happened in the financial crisis. So what is scary to me is remembering what happened in 2008. If we are anywhere near that in 2023 to 2024, it's scary. If we are 4 to 5 times that by the federal government, I'm actually not sure how to quantify that. Then if we look at it from this level, all right, so emergency loans, not great. Maybe that's not that big of a deal. Well, let's look at borrowing levels. The U.S. is borrowing more now than during the COVID-19 pandemic, with interest rates around 5%. So during COVID-19, we were basically at 0% interest rates. Now we're at 5%. You guys know what that feels like. Have you tried to go get a house lately? Have you looked at like the difference in interest rates for the mortgage you could afford 2 or 3 years ago versus now? That is what's happening in the government at scale. This graph is basically showing you, oh my gosh, we are issuing trillions of dollars in bonds. And oh, by the way, we're paying really high interest payments to do it. The next graph is basically showing you interest payments on the national debt that we have. And what's crazy is for the first time ever, we have net interest. So just us paying our interest payments. It's like you having a credit card that instead of you paying off the amount every month, you just pay the interest that you accumulate. That fat debt is still sitting there on your credit card. And on top of it, you're barely making interest payments. Well, for the first time ever, our net interest payments in the US, we pay more towards those than we do our national defense, which is scary in a world in which China's China-ing. And we have what's happening in the Middle East, and we have what's happening in Russia. Then we got a trifecta, in case you guys aren't ready to slit your wrists already, which is the dollar devaluation. So the dollar's lost like 25% of its value in just 4 years. 25 cents of every dollar that you own, you have lost because of devaluation of our dollar over the last 4 years. If you were to go back to the 70s, we're talking about losing almost 75% of $1 in just that amount of time. Then, interestingly enough, who owns most treasuries, or the way that we fund our economy? Who is our like mom and dad funding our bills? Well, that's China in a lot of ways. China holds more treasury securities than anybody else, but Rutro, since about 2010 when they peaked, 2014 when they peaked again, they are now back to almost historical lows of how much they own of treasuries. So China doesn't want to be our buddy and stabilize our economy anymore. So I talk a lot about business buying, and I get a lot of questions about it. One of the most common questions is, where do you find a business to buy? The answer is sad, because the worst deals are oversaturated marketplace sites, but the best deals are off-market or curated. Either way, finding a business to buy basically sucks, and I think it should suck less. So that's why we've built something for you guys, BizScout, a business buying marketplace full of only the best deals for both on and off-market. And BizScout is just built different, okay? We've got verified buyers, so the best sellers are actually interested in selling. Scout sites, aka at a glance, what's the quick analysis of this deal? Off-market data, so you can get all the info you need to direct outreach efficiently. Embedded lending, so you can get your financing for the business right where you buy it. BizScout is going to change the face of Main Street buying and selling. Probably not immediately. We have a lot more work to do, but I want you guys to be part of it, to be part of the buyers and builders in this next round. So you guys are one of the first to hear. Go to bizscout.com and check it out. Then we've got the BRICS. I remember when these got created when I was at Goldman, which is Brazil, Russia, India, and China. It's a grouping of countries that came together to sort of combat U.S. dominance, right? They came together and said, what if we create a coalition between the four of us? Well, it turns out that many people outside of the U.S., including the BRICS nation, which are a huge block of power, are buying large amounts of gold instead of U.S. treasuries. I mean, check this out. You can basically see that during the financial crisis, we had record high levels of gold bought. More gold than I know how to quantify. We got Fort Knoxes of gold all around the globe. Well, guess what? We're just about to surpass that level of gold held in 2024. And gold holding is usually an indicator of a risk-off trade, which basically means, oh man, I'm worried about what's happening in the economy, so I'm going to pull back risk. Then we've got de-dollarization. So China has started to use its own currency for most cross-border transactions. What does that mean? Well, in the past, if you wanted to do a deal like China and India, or if you wanted to do a deal China and Latin America, China would use US dollar, Latin American countries would use US dollar, and that would be their trading currency. China's now said, nah, we're going to use our own. We're going to use yuan. And that basically means that we're seeing more deals done in Chinese currency than the US currency, at least by China. And that's not great because that decreases the amount of liquidity and usage of our own currency, which we don't want. Then we made another kind of series of dumb decisions. We had a sanction on Russia and Europe that we thought was going to hurt Russia, but actually ended up hurting Europe more. So we said, no natural gas, no energy for you, Europe. We're going to shut you off from Russia because Russia really needs your cash. Turned out not to be the case. The other problem with this, it's like a little a little highbrow to understand is like, imagine we used to use the dollar. You were supposed to use the dollar as a government. You were supposed to say, we do not politicize our usage of the dollar. You just go out and for anybody who wants to use the dollar, trade it back and forth amongst people, go off and prosper. Well, the second that you start politicizing the dollar, which means saying, hey, we are going to use sanctions on Russia. We are going to tell them they can't trade in USD. Well, what happens? They start using other currencies and going to other providers, and that's what's happened in Russia. Then the other thing that's a little scary is from a peacetime perspective, usually in times of peace, not times of war, debt goes down. But what has happened to us since the 1900s? Well, we have skyrocketed post-2000 to some of the highest levels of national debt we've ever had. And all of this together tells me that there is something to worry about. And we'll get into answers of what you do next, but have you ever tried to solve a problem without having proper context for a problem? You know, have you ever started to like sit down and think, how do I fix my business? It's not working. How do I fix my relationship? It's not working. Well, if you go to fix your relationship and you're like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to love language the shit out of them. I'm going to buy her so many flowers and gifts and presents and outings. And you don't actually understand why your wife is upset is because she just wants quality time with you and you to listen to her more and you to be kinder to her. She doesn't want fancy things. She doesn't want flowers. If you don't understand the situation you're in, you can't actually fix it. So I think one of the most important parts of this podcast is to understand what's going on in our world around us so that we can fix it and we can prepare for it properly. So what's interesting is, according to my friend Balaji, who is the CTO of Coinbase, one of the smartest men I know, and did this famous tweet right here, I just burned 1 million to tell you that they're printing trillions. His point here was, I'm concerned about the chance of a crisis. And so Balaji thinks there's a 10% chance of a crisis happening soon, a 70% chance in the next 2 years, which is scary because he's very smart. Now, what does that look like? If you look back at history, it took just 2 days from the collapse of SVB, you guys remember Silicon Valley Bank sort of collapsing and everybody freaking out, to then the government printing $300 billion. Within 2 weeks, $500 billion was withdrawn from local banks seeking safety. That was one bank and its ripple effect. Lockdowns due to COVID-19 were implemented just 2 months after the virus hit the US. The financial crisis was only acknowledged 2 quarters after Ben Bernanke, the chairman of the Fed at the time, mild recession, famously, mild recession prediction. And then, Balaji says, the USSR transitioned from a superpower to collapse in just 2 years. And so his point here is multi-pronged, which is we have major issues all across our economy, which means that you guys need to learn how to become asset holders more and more. We need to learn how to become asset holders because if we add on top of this the commercial real estate crisis that I think is happening all around us, you guys have seen it. You travel around to different parts of your city here in Austin, Texas. If you were to drive any street with eyes to see, you would see vacant commercial centers. Why would that happen? Somebody owns those. Why would they just be sitting there empty? Well, they're sitting there empty because in order for them to sell it, they'd have to mark down their portfolio, which means that they'd have to say, we told you investors this was worth $100, it's actually worth $20. And because of that, they're going to have a ripple effect through their entire portfolio. It's also why they aren't leasing those things out. Then we've got pension crisis. We've got underfunded pensions to the tune of like $1.4 trillion with a T. We've got auto loans rising in their default rate, which means people not about to pay them. I think that's also at risk. We've also got record high credit card debt. So $930 billion in credit card debt in the US. This is a all-time high. And then we've got more people moving away from the dollar. So we've got some serious issues here in this country, which is why I impress upon all of us to really think about how do we get to financial freedom and protect ourselves from an environment in which we have global uncertainty that we've probably never seen before. I think maybe the only place that's worse off in some degrees is Europe, because they're literally playing a game of 1984 between the government instituting that somebody could get jailed because of what they tweet or put on Facebook is something that I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. All right, let's get into some wild and crazy stuff now that we're talking about 1984 in Europe, because why not? Crazy idea. I don't think it's awesome to have Facebook CEO Zuckerberg tell you that he was lightly coerced into censoring news. during the last election cycle and also during COVID. I don't think it's awesome to have a founder of a tech company arrested in France for not sharing information on citizens. I definitely don't think it's awesome for governments like the UK and the European Union to say that they would come after even US citizens for things that they say online that they don't like. Elon Musk posted this tweet, which is sadly kind of true. It's 2030 in Europe and you're being executed for liking a meme, which increasingly feels like that could be reasonable. But what's fascinating to me is we don't seem to be very good at second and third order effects. We think that if one party tells us something we don't like, we should censor them. But we don't actually think about the opposite, which is what happens when your party or the opposite party from yours says something that you don't like. What happens when your guys go out of power and the other guys come into power? Then you just play a game of going after one another. It's why we shouldn't arrest former presidents for political reasons. It's why we should make sure everybody gets free speech, even when we don't like what they're saying. And it's why we should make sure that we push back on censorship anywhere we can. And yet, for some reason, this has become non-normalized. It's become okay for people to say that you shouldn't be allowed to talk. Stay in your lane. You're not an expert. Motherfucker, no. I'm an expert as an American in the First Amendment, which is that we have the right to free speech. And I do not think we should allow anybody to push back on that. Now, I got to read this next thing to you because let's go back to Argentina and Venezuela, where I had a business before. So if you've never been to Venezuela, you probably didn't know that if you wanted to buy a chicken, this is how much money you would need, or about 14 million bolivars, which is their version of a dollar. That would be the equivalent to $2.22 USD. 14 million bolivar to $2.22. Now, how did it happen where in Venezuela, their currency became worth so little that they make purses out of it like this on the street? Like literally you can have a purse made entirely of dollar bills. You know how that started? Price controls. 2 words that sound awesome and actually are not, which is probably why that quote is true, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It just sounds so good. I go to the grocery store and I see the prices of groceries today and I get pissed. I'm like, why do I have to pay $20 for this fancy organic XYZ? The problem is that we don't want the government to set anything. And let me explain and I'm not going after one candidate or another. I won't even say who said this idea about price controls. All I will say is, if you want a masterclass in price controls, go look at Venezuela and Argentina and see how it worked out for them. Spoiler, not great. So I want to read you a tweet from a friend of mine. We should just listen to what he has to say about it. This is a friend of mine, Robert, who is the CFO of a company. He's saying people need to stop overreacting about X's plan to reduce food inflation, as it would lead to communism, mass starvation, and the end of America. He's like, come on, I worked in M&A in the food industry. Here's a step-by-step summary of what would actually happen. Step 1, the government announces that grocery retailers aren't allowed to raise prices. Grocery stores, which operate on 1 to 2 net margins, can't survive if their suppliers raise prices. So the government announces that food producers, next line, also aren't allowed to raise prices. Okay, well, not all grocery stores are created equal, so stores in lower income areas make less money than high income ones, right? Because these aren't able to cover their overhead, grocery chains start to shut down. So that means we have food deserts in rural areas, in low income urban areas. That becomes even worse. Meanwhile, margins for food producers going down. Their primary costs, ingredients, energy, and labor, aren't fixed, and they have shrinking profits. So, number 5, grocery stores, which have finite shelf space, start to repurpose their stores, those that didn't have to shut down, to sell more non-price controlled items. So your local Kroger or Safeway starts to look and feel more like a Walmart. Food producers then stop making products with lower margins. No eggs or milk or bread because they can't make any money on it, so their businesses are starting to die. So then they compete on things like payment terms and how long you can pay for something. Then small grocery chains start to shut down entirely, so whole chains, or they get sold to larger chains like Kroger. In addition, not being able to cover the fixed costs, a major reason is because they can't secure delivery of products due to producers prioritizing sales to larger customers. and those that might stay in business because they have to float sometimes the customer payment. So the smaller food producers, which typically sell via distributors rather than right to the grocery stores, they go out of business because these producers have an additional step in their value chain. So they actually have higher costs because you're a smaller guy. As supply chains break down, lines start to form outside grocery stores every morning. Now, cities assign police officers to patrol store parking lots, and food producers draft contingency plans to assign armed escorts to delivery trucks. Step 10, the federal government announces a program to issue block grants for states to purchase and operate shuttered grocery stores, because government's here to help. The USDA also seizes closed down production facilities because you're not allowed to close down. 11, the government announces that prices for all key food costs, corn, wheat, cattle, energy, are now fixed to stop profiteers, in air quotes, from gouging the now government-operated food industry. 12, shockingly, the government struggles to operate one of the most complex industries on the planet. The entire food supply chain starts imploding. What happens next? Communism, mass starvation, and the end of America quickly ensue. Hey, wait a second. And you have to laugh at this slightly, except that it's a tale as old as time. I had a friend who ran, I kid you not, a distributor for Mercedes-Benz in Argentina. And when Cristina Fernandez came in and took over the government, they nationalized his business and they mandated he produced coffee. This motherfucker knew nothing about coffee, but they could export coffee. And she no longer wanted to allow imports of Mercedes-Benz. So what happened? He tried for a while before the business went under because he had no idea what he was doing. That is the problem with when we try to have the government as big brother taking care of anything. And this is where some people go, well, some price controls are great. And you're right. Some price controls are necessary so profiteers do not gouge the American public. Like, for instance, you could say, what about pharma? What about those fuckers in pharma just charging us $1 million for everything? And you'd be right in some ways. For instance, U.S. drug prices are roughly 3x higher than prices anywhere else. And yet, we account for roughly a third, up to 60% of the revenue of U.S. pharma companies. In some places, price controls are intelligent. Like, for instance, we should be thoughtful about life-saving drugs and trying to make sure that we have price controls so people can have access to them and there doesn't become a massive amount of profiteering. But the problem becomes when we think that something that works on the edges works across the board. And that is the truth of what's happening right now in the U.S. So the truth of the matter is, we got some work to do. But I think what you need to realize listening to all of this is that your ability to earn is really focused on two things. That is your willingness to continue to do what it takes and your ability to pick the right market for you. That market increasingly is something that you have to think about when it comes to federal and regulatory oversight. Lots of people these days like to play in online businesses, for instance. They like to play in businesses that seem a little bit sexier. But guess what? In a market in which we're coming into a recession, in which things might get harder, you are probably going to be happier with a plumbing company that everybody needs, as opposed to a gaming company online, as opposed to starting that e-commerce store that you saw with some one-off widget that nobody really actually needs. When times get tough, there's always a way to make money, but some ways are a lot harder than others. If you guys think we should do an entire episode on what to do in order to make money and continue to persevere in a down market when we have a recession, if the market continues to get more difficult, let me know and we will do that on one of these next podcasts. But in the meantime, remember this. Whenever the government says, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, they're typically not. And I am talking about red, white, blue, purple, whatever the fuck color they show up as. The only good government is a one that is at a distance, allowing you to be able to continue to do the things you need to do on a daily basis, as opposed to mandating you do one thing or another. And that is a hill I will die on. All right, if you guys thought this was useful and an interesting way to break down some of the stuff that we're talking about so you can be more intelligent in conversations where people want to get emotional about politics and economics as opposed to being rational about it, let me know in the comments. We're going to maybe do more of these current events because I think in a world so crazy, we've got to know what's going on so we know what's coming. See you next time.
At this place, we are not a family. If you work for a business right now where they tell you that it is a family, you should run away. A business is a high-performing team. You're either excellent or this place isn't for you. You don't go to the Chicago Bulls so that you feel comfortable. You don't go play on Kobe's Laker team so that you can do whatever you want and you don't have to get any fucking feedback. Competition is fucking fun, you guys. There's a thrill to trying to see what you're capable of. This is the Big Deal Podcast, and I'm Codie Sanchez. Today, we're going to talk about how to get on winning teams, how to run winning teams, and we're going to talk about what it takes to actually have the life that you want, because you can't get very far by yourself. This is kind of a Codie was having a hissy fit last week situation where I was running some stuff with teams. Running teams are one of the hardest things you'll ever do in your life. If you've ever done it, you know, whether it's your kids' basketball team or it is your actual company that you're running. The best part about running a business, the people. The worst part about running a business, the people. And so this episode is kind of like the hard truth I want to instill and bury into the brains of every single human who works for me, and also young Codie, and Codie before she had achieved a lot of things that she wanted in life. And so if you are worried at all about how do you run better teams, and if you want to be a winner on a team, this episode's for you. I want to start with a story. And this story is from a book I've been reading lately called 11 Rings by Phil Jackson, who is one of the most storied basketball coaches of all time. He won with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen during the Chicago Bulls era, sort of like the most famous period in all of basketball in the U.S. And then he went on to win also with Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal in the Los Angeles Lakers. And so he's just a legend. And I want to share some of the stories that he shared. One story I want to share is about how he is called the Zen Master. So this was kind of counterintuitive for me, but I believe that the way things start is usually the way things go. And if you don't like it in the beginning, you're not going to like it in the end. And why I like this and relate this to being a Zen Master is, if you don't know, Phil Jackson was a practicing Zen Master and practiced Buddhism. So he's like this big, huge former basketball player, kind of known for being fiery, yelling at players. A lot of players didn't like him. He didn't like a lot of players. So he's this intense figure who simultaneously is a Buddhist, which is kind of interesting. And they called him the Zen Master because he would have a group of gnarled, intense, sometimes from the hood basketball players like the original Chicago Bulls were, and he would try to get them to meditate. And what I think is interesting is the way things start is the way they end. He was pretty famous for every single day meditating in the morning. And I know a lot of these days, self-help gurus talk about the importance of meditating. Can I tell you something right now? There would be zero way I could run the number of businesses I run right now if meditating wasn't a part of my practice. 60% of the time. Not every day. I wish I was that perfect. But if you're wondering what you could be doing every single day that literally wouldn't even be a hard tax on your body, would be like stroking yourself like a little cat that needs an itch, it would be meditating. And I get that from one of the hardest dudes I know. And in fact, he even went so far as to tame Dennis Rodman in many ways, who was a psychopath, if you didn't know him, famously friends with Kim Jong-un, and one of the more wild basketball players of all time. And one of the ways that he did that was by teaching Dennis Rodman meditation. Another story that he told that I thought was really interesting was a story about a Buddhist monk, and I'm going to tell the story to you, and then I'm going to tell you why it matters and how you can use it with your team, because I just told it to them on our Monday call we do each week. The story goes like this: there's a Buddhist monk who travels around to a bunch of towns in China, and he shares his wisdom. He's known for these long, intense philosophical lectures where he speaks to groups of hundreds of monks. And one week, as he's giving one at the end, he's wrapping it up, and we see all the monks sort of enraptured with his wisdom and brilliance. But one monk raises his hand, and he says, "I actually understood not one thing you said during the last few hours. Could you tell me one simple thing that is true about Buddhism?" And the monk thinks for a minute, and he just says, "Everything changes." And why I think this is so important is because a lot of times in my teams, I see a little freak out about change. We humans do not like it much. It typically signals some sort of transition in which we could have a threat or something could go wrong with us. But in fact, if we can get used to change, then we can get more used to winning, because how can you grow a tree but start with a seed? How can the seed become a tree, but crack open, expand, get watered, grow into something absolutely ridiculous is only by the fact that change is inevitable and it has to go through it. And so I loved that story from him. The idea that Phil Jackson has is one that I try to inspire my teams, which is basically this, that at this place, we are not a family. We're not a family. And I, in fact, think that if you work for a business right now where they tell you that it is a family, you should run away because it's not true. You don't fire your family unless, they did something really gross. You don't yell at your family in a performance review and tell them that they're not meeting company expectations and give a scorecard to grandma. You're just like, okay, grandma, she says inappropriate shit every time she gets a little ginned up. Okay, fine. It's a totally different thing. So a team is not a family. A business is not a family. What is it? A business is a high-performing team. At my companies, we run fast and we grow, and we're some of the fastest companies in our sectors because we operate like the Chicago Bulls. The idea is you're either excellent or this place isn't for you. And hey, no problem. Not everybody wants excellence, and that's okay. You can go do non-excellence just about anywhere else in the country. But if you are one of those crazy motherfuckers that can't sleep for the want of becoming a better human, that wants to wring out the capability you have within you, that wants to make as much money as possible, create things that matter in the world, and actually do it with a group of other people who are just as good as you, then you want to work at my companies. And that's what we say. You don't go to the Chicago Bulls so that you feel comfortable. You don't go play on Kobe's Laker team so that you can do whatever you want and you don't have to get any fucking feedback. You go on those teams because you're like, I am the best in the world and I will win at this championship. And if you don't want to win, you go play in the B leagues. You have a beer club. Like, that's fine. Nobody's saying that you have to do that. This is a self-selected process. But I think we should be honest about the fact that the best businesses are like teams. You trade players when they don't fit anymore. They trade you when they want a different salary or a different geography. You guys hope that you make each other better. You take care of each other. You exit in the right way. You have good and constructive feedback, and you have really harsh conversations. But you don't expect to be tied together for life. If you are tied together for life, that's a partnership, and that's something a little bit different. And only a few of the people that you work with through time will actually become partners. My old boss, Jim Bowen, used to call it people who would travel through time with. The only people that got partnership, aka equity at that company, were people who traveled through time together. And that, I think, is very true. The other thing that I wish I realized earlier about teams and being a winner is this. Look up the history. Do you think Scottie Pippen, one of the best basketball players of all time, and Michael Jordan, arguably the best basketball player of all time, you think they got along the whole time they were at the Chicago Bulls? Well, actually, if you looked at, all of the posters and the paraphernalia, you might think, yeah, they look like best buddies. He's always feeding him the ball. They're like the two biggest names. They built this huge team. But actually, they hated each other many times. They rubbed against each other the wrong way. They had massive friction. They disagreed. They pushed each other because the truth of the matter is iron sharpens iron. And I think the other thing we have to realize that we've totally lost in this world today, I don't really know why, but we've lost the ability to have really difficult conversations with people and to say, you really want to go there? You actually want to have this conversation? Do you think you're on the right side? And push back. And have the other person push back too. And the truth of it is, you can push back on two people as long as you're excellent. It stops becoming so interesting when you're not excellent. Then you're just cantankerous. But if you're actually trying to better the team, if you're trying to get better yourself, then that's exactly what you should be doing. And we should be okay with a little bit of creative friction on teams. In fact, if you're running a team right now in the business sense, one of the most important things that I've realized is you have to have built-in incentive friction on your teams. So think about this. In basketball, some players are defenders, right? And some people are offense. So some people are going to try to score a basket and some people are trying to stop the other team from scoring a basket. They are inherently at odds. The defenders want to make sure that it's super hard for anybody to make mistakes. The offense wants to make sure that they can push, they can score, they can shoot the ball, they can let the ball out of their hands and shoot it at a net and maybe miss it and maybe have the other side get it. Now, inherently, that's not the same thing, and it's the same in business. You need to have people who are saying, I want revenue here. Drive revenue, drive revenue, drive revenue. But if you allow the person who drives revenue to also control quality at your business, does that always work? And the answer is no. I mean, we made a big mistake the other day with one of our companies. we actually had a big email list, and content used to contain that email list, and the email list then moved to marketing, and marketing used the email list as a revenue driver, as they should. That's what marketing does. But content was sort of asleep at the wheel and not realizing that, oh, wait a second, we should be protecting this asset. This is a product. You can't use this to squeeze an email list for revenue. Do you see the inherent tension? If they both are aligned to only revenue or only quality, then we won't move. This is the left and the right-hand side of an oar. And so everything in business is basically you as the leader going left, and your team starts rowing left, and they push all the way through the left stroke. And then you go right, and they grab the right-hand side of the oar, and they pull the boat right. And your team's like, how come you keep going left, right? Why can't we all row the same way? Because that's not actually how you forward propel a boat. You forward propel a boat continuously straight by pulling the left and the right oar. Most of your team is never going to get this. Some of them, if you explain it really simply, might. The other thing to realize is that, I love this idea. It's actually a quote from Plato, which is that necessity is the mother of all invention. But Phil Jackson talked about it because they play an interesting game. In sports, you have what's called a zero-sum game, right? So one person loses, which means one person can win. There are not two winners. There is no participation trophy. There is just one. And in business, that's often not the case. Like there are very few industries in which only one person can survive, in which if I sell you X, my competitor has to lose Y. That's not usually the case. And so what I love about this is it basically shows you in that instance, they're playing the ultimate game. You are either a winner or a loser. And if you think about that in business, we've gotten a little soft to this idea that not everybody can be a winner. And that if you're in business, that using even the word loser is bad. We lost this, we failed at this, we didn't make it. And I don't think that's true. When you have a loss, you learn more from the loss than you do from a win. What do you do when you win? You celebrate. What do you do when you lose? You ask yourself, what did we do wrong? What happened here? How do we change this? And the best teams, they become better by continuing to push one way or the other. One of the best things that winners do that others don't is they do something called call your shot. That's what we call it at Contrarian Thinking. So anytime we set a big goal for ourselves, let's say I say, hey, we're going to close a big deal. We're going to invest in a company. We're going to make this much money in the next month or two. And I say, I am so certain that we're going to do it. I want to pit myself against the world. I want to play a zero-sum game in which I either hit this goal or I didn't. We say that's called to call your shot, kind of like you might call your shot at a free throw line, like that's going in, or a three-pointer, or I'm going to score this many points per game. And the reason why you do that is because competition is fucking fun, you guys. I think as we get older as adults, we forget about this game of competition. Unless we're athletes all the time playing against one another, there's a thrill to trying to see what you're capable of. And so if you want to be a winner, I think a fun thing to do even in your business, even as an employee, is to say, I want to call my shot on this. I think I'm going to be able to hit this thing by this date faster than anybody else. And if you're not even an employee, I think about it. For instance, my mom, who I love. We call her the bulldog. She's an absolute animal. She just gets things done, or she's like a dog on a bone. She's just like, just gnaws on the fucking thing until the marrow comes out. And so anyway, we had a problem near the office with a homeless dude. And the homeless dude, whatever, he's staying on a lot by the office. But you guys, and you could only make this up in Austin, Texas, he takes over the lot. Then he creates like a house on the lot, like a tent house on the lot. We're kind of ignoring him. It's fine. I'm watching to see if there's anything dangerous going on. Well, it escalates when he threatens one of my employees with a knife and tells her that she can't park in front of his property because he is turning into a paid parking lot and she is in front of his parking lot. And so he says, do not park there, threatens her with a knife. Anyway, we call the cops. The cops come, and I fuck you not. I couldn't make this stuff up if I wanted to. The cops come, and they talk to my husband, and they tell him that they can't do anything because the guy says that she was parking in front of his ingress-egress. And so she shouldn't do that. So you almost have to laugh. So anyway, my mom heard this and was like, this is ridiculous. Law-abiding, paying taxes citizens. We're going to make sure that is not acceptable. And so what does she do? She like works the problem. And she says, we're going to finalize this to make sure all of your people are safe. And we're going to do it in the next 30 days. And lo and behold, I get a phone call today and she does it. And so I don't want you to think this is just related to business. Call your shot in life. You might surprise yourself at what you're capable of. And then the cool part is you might actually do it. And it could be a small thing or it could be a big thing. The last thing on Phil Jackson I want to close with is that he has a great saying. So let's say that 2024 was not your year. Team hasn't done what you wanted to do. Your business hasn't. Your life hasn't gone the way that you want it to go. He says, do you want to know the best way to not win this year? It's to do what you did last year. And it's so simple, except so often we keep repeating the exact same habits, routines, people we hang out with from one year to the other. And so if everything changes is the mantra we know to be true, then we've got to make sure that we change alongside it, because the only thing that we know will kill us for certain is in a world in which everything is evolving. If we stand still, what are we actually doing? We're atrophying. Physics tells us this. There is no such thing as stasis. You cannot stand still. Even right now, if I wasn't moving, I would be breathing, blood would be pumping, atoms in my body would be moving around. There is no such thing as standing still. So if you are not moving, you are actually doing what? You're atrophying. You're starting to die. And I remember that a lot in business. That's why you have to set bigger goals every single year, because if you think, hey, let's just keep the business exactly like this, well, what do we know? I don't know, inflation increased by anywhere from 3 to 10%. More competitors come on board, so they come at us. Maybe our product is old, and so the product needs a little bit of zhuzhing up because it's not as relevant anymore. Maybe AI has crept in some way. So if we aren't evolving, we are dying. And if you do the same things this year that you did last year, you're not going to make it. And I think that's a hard truth. Okay, let's do a few stats here to show you that I think I'm right, and we'll see if the data backs this up. So Harvard psychology professor Dr. Richard Hackman actually found that when a team was called a family, it reduces constructive conflict and challenge and lowers the profits of the business. He also found that often it increases employee disengagement, which is problematic because Gallup already says that 70% of employees are disengaged in the workplace, largely due to what? Why are they disengaged? Do they not make enough money? Do they not like their boss? Do you know what the two main reasons are? There's not enough challenge or accountability in what they do. It's actually just that we're all these little monkeys that we're like, we want the banana. When we touch the red, button, feed us. When we touch the green one and we're not supposed to, don't feed us. We want to know that our work matters. We want to know we're going to get compensated when we do the right thing. And we want to know that somebody's watching one way or another. Otherwise, why are we here every single day with you guys at work when we could be with our family? And I think that's why. In the trust factor study, Meister and Green actually saw that too much safety in the workplace actually breeds complacency and inhibits performance. So when you give too much trust, when you don't push, what happens? It actually means that you don't perform as well, which I think we know this to be true, but it's always helpful when the data backs it up. Okay, my last little pitch to you guys on the data portion of this is look at this. So Kinsey did a study that said, if you have low-performing people on your team, and you do not measure productivity of the team overall, what happens? Well, top quartile teams with no low performers on them, they achieve 50% more profitability and 30% more productivity. So when you don't have underperformers on your team, no shock kind of, but when you actually have accountability with those top performers, you make 50% more money and you're 30% more productive. So holding your team accountable makes you more money. I think that makes perfect sense. Another thing that I want to talk about is this idea of attrition. So a lot of times people will say, well, do companies have a lot of people that rotate through them? And that could be a bad thing. And they're right, that could be a bad thing. But it's actually not always a bad thing. Let me explain this. So we see in a bunch of data from Forbes and Harvard that companies with strong performance-driven culture actually have higher rates of employee turnover, so more people leave, but it often represents people finding the right place for them. So this self-selection, aka, hey, this actually isn't a right fit for me at this company because I want to do X or I want to do Y or I don't work this hard, actually allows you to continuously right-size the team as opposed to have bloat. I mean, have you guys seen the government lately, right? We've got billions of dollars cut from the government in 1 week. How does that happen? There's zero accountability in that place. Guess what else? Government employees are the least satisfied with their job. They also are the least likely to get fired. And yet, they are spending all of our taxpayer dollars. Why? Because there's no accountability and there's no performance basis for being in the government. In fact, and I would know because my husband worked in the government for a long time, a lot of times there's not even hierarchical structures. So you don't even have a direct boss. You don't have KPIs, key performance indicators. You don't have a specific thing that you have to hit, otherwise you might get fired. And that, it turns out, is really bad for teams, obviously bad for us as taxpayers, and bad for us as individuals, even though it might sound nice to not get micromanaged all the time. Okay, one other thought here. I found this fascinating Forbes study that actually shows that companies that embrace a performance-driven culture and quote unquote tough love attract higher performing talent and grow at a faster rate than those that focus on retention at all costs. So you would actually make more money, probably be happier, have a better and more profitable team if you gave constructive feedback, if you held people accountable, and even if you had higher turnover. Fascinating. One of the other keys to teamwork that I've been thinking about a lot lately is I think personality hires got a really bad rap. So if you're a personality hire out there, I actually think you got a really big place. There are a lot of reasons why you need a team that is completely different. Let's take the Lakers, for instance. If you go back to Kobe Bryant, he was supposedly really hard to work with. I mean, rest in peace. But he knew how excellent he was. He was pretty intense on his teammates. He always wanted the ball. He always wanted to take his own shots. He and Shaq got into it all the time. Shaq was a little bit more respectful of hierarchy. Kobe could give a fuck. And so they had two totally different personalities. So what did that mean? It actually meant that Phil Jackson had to have other members of the team who could massage the situation. They weren't as good as Kobe. They weren't as big as Shaq, but they went in there with one purpose, which was to make the team cohese together, to bring it together like glue. And so I think sometimes we have to ask ourselves, who is the glue on the team? Is there somebody cracking jokes? Is there somebody who at the end of a terrible meeting is kind of saying, okay, well, this is awful. We got to close this. We'll all hate each other tomorrow. Is there somebody kind of bringing levity to what you do every single day? And if not, that might be your next hire. Let's talk about you. One of the fascinating parts about performance is that we know through multiple studies that if you believe in yourself, you have a higher likelihood to succeed. And if others believe in you, you have an even higher likelihood to succeed. In fact, we know that people's perception of us is so important to us that it can even raise our IQ. When we have students who are labeled as being special, but actually report no higher IQ than another placebo group, just the label means that those students increase their IQ points by 4 points over the course of a year. So what does this mean? Even if you aren't the winner on the team right now, even if you don't have a winning team, how can you believe that you can get there? I think that entrepreneurship is this mixture of unbelievable, irrational self-belief and not quitting. In fact, I want to read you guys something. This was in my diary the other day, and I'm going to read it to you. Okay. I was writing this on a moment where I was recalling back what it was like early on in being an entrepreneur and how hard it is. And I wrote this. The most brutal and quiet battle you'll ever have to wage is to create the life you want. It's not just the doing it, it's keeping the irrational self-belief that you can, believing even when all proof says you won't and you have no success to show for it. You'll have sleepless nights, and even to your partner, you won't be able to fully explain. No one else gets the weight of not being able to pay bills or secretly worrying you're completely incapable. People say imposter syndrome isn't real. Wrong. I've never met a successful person who wasn't hanging on to the edge of discomfort. But if you can keep this battle alive, keep believing in you despite all of that, you will achieve maybe even more than you set out. That is the truth of the battle of life. I hope this was useful for you this week. This is a solo pod from my heart to your heart, something that I'm struggling with that I hope you struggle a little bit less. I wish somebody had shared these lessons with me, the goods, the bads, the uglies. That's what we do on the Big Deal Pod. I'm Codie Sanchez, and if you haven't subscribed, please do. If you haven't shared with a buddy to tell them you think that they're a winner, please do. That's the only way the podcast grows.